I'm Shannon Sims.
And I'm Charles Benson. Welcome to 4-1 Forward.
From today's TMJ4, this is 4-1 Forward.
He's Milwaukee's longest-serving police chief since Harold Breyer's days. Chief Ed Flynn begins his 10th year on the job after arriving in January of 2008 to the Brew City.
The data-driven chief is here with us this morning for a conversation on a number of topics. Thank you very much for being here. Let's talk about some of the things that are in the news right now, and it is the soon-to-be released, the U.S. Department of Justice report done by the Community-Oriented Policing Services, better known as the COPS Review. You asked for this federal review. What are your expectations?
Well, it's my hope that they'll take an objective look at our relationships with the community right now against the context of the challenges we face with the community. You know, one of the great challenges in American law enforcement right now is the fact that those communities that are most burdened by the highest rates of victimization for violent crime are frequently the same communities that, for understandable social and historical reasons, are somewhat distrustful of law enforcement's attempts to deal with that high level of violence. Mm-hmm. Certainly here in Milwaukee, we share that distinction with many of our colleague cities, that neighborhoods that call upon us, invite us in, help us, we are suffering this violence. We apply various evidence-based police strategies, and those strategies create disparities as well. If I'm going to put all my cops in a hotspot and they're going to engage in some form of proactive policing, it's going to generate disparities compared to the citywide census data, not necessarily the census data in that district. And some percentage of people affected by that are going to be offended by it. All right? So that's a stressor. And my hope was to bring the DOJ folks from Collaborative Reform, because they're not coming in here looking for a pattern and practice lawsuit. It's not adversarial. The point is they're going to come in here and look at the whole picture.
It's a voluntary review.
It's a voluntary review. We asked for it on the heels of getting accredited by the Wisconsin Law Enforcement Accreditation Group, by far the biggest city to achieve that. So we knew our policies and procedures were up to snuff, but we really wanted, external eyes, not eyes from inside Milwaukee, to come and say, okay, you've got this, you're trying to do this, however, this is happening, we suggest you do this. So that's the goal. I know it's been delayed somewhat for a variety of reasons, but that's certainly our hope, and we're looking forward to the results.
So you know that it's been being finalized. Have you had a chance to look at the preliminary report?
Well, initially, what Collaborative Reform does is they come to your town and they spend a lot of time talking to people. And what they do then is come back and say, all right, these are the things we are hearing. These are some of the things we have found. They don't want me to argue with them and say, no, that person's wrong. But to the extent that we can provide verifiable documentation, for example, someone would say, well, they don't have a policy on the use of force. Well, here's our policy on the use of force. Here's our training curriculum on the use of force. Yes, we do. Here's the data on the use of force. They'll accept documentation. Okay, they're not going to accept argumentation. So if they've done a data dump and the data is incorrect, we're invited to bring data that relates to that data, or as I say, bring documentation that there is something objective different than what they were told. But that's the extent of it. Then they take it all back, and I have not seen anything subsequent to that. I think we have to keep in mind that with the change of administration, I was told, and this may be a hyperbole, but at the time they told me there are 21 different entities supposed to review this report before it's released.
That's a lot.
Okay?
Wow.
Now, that's a lot. To the extent that suddenly all of those 21 points are like in some level of turmoil, I think that's slowed it down, but it shouldn't be too much longer, I would hope.
So the guarantee you can make here, if you get that report, a final report, you're going to make it public.
Well, it's up to them to make it public.
But once you get it,
well,
if you get a final.
No, well, there is a what's the right word? An etiquette to this.
Sure.
DOJ comes to the city.
They are the ones
convenes a press conference and makes the announcement. Exactly.
So, but this is a deep dive into community police, community-oriented policing, is it? You talked about job training, use of force things, but it's a big picture here, right?
Well, that's the hope and expectation. All right. The idea is we want Collaborative Reform to help identify those disconnects between what we are sincerely trying to do from a position of goodwill and how those efforts are perceived by different strata of the community, and what are the bridges we can pull together so that we maintain our ability to use evidence-based policing that helps make people safer, but at the same time does not unnecessarily alienate people, and that we make clear that every disparity doesn't mean bias.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
That there's always going to be some level of disparity when there's this much victimization. How do we take the edge off those disparities and make sure that the community experiences us as a positive force on their behalf?
Chief, you spoke about the bridge, and I had a chance to overhear what you and Assistant Harpole had to say to the Common Council in the crime safety meeting that just happened. You list a number of things that your community outreach and education department is doing. How important is it for the work that you see in the districts and in OCO to continue to build that bridge with the police department and with a community where the trust is strained?
Well, it's interesting. You know, there are elements of the community saying, well, Chief, we know what you need to do. You need to do community policing and problem solving. And I'm like scratching my head and saying, well, you know, our mission statement says we're going to do community-based problem-oriented data policing. Every district has got community liaison officers, steady beat assignments. We've doubled the number of bicycles. We've brought back foot patrols. We changed the district lines to keep neighborhoods together and not split them up. We gave every district their own radio channel. You know, we're all in on community-based policing. But the fact of the matter is, community-based policing isn't something you do instead of crime fighting. It's the same thing.
Okay.
They go hand in hand.
The idea is, I was at the Rose Garden signing in 1993 when President Clinton signed this bill. Yeah. Okay, I was on the original Community Policing Advisory Board when I was the police chief back in Chelsea in the late 90s. I mean, I've been in this game
community
a lot.
policing,
Exactly.
right? Okay.
And so the goal always was get rid of the hyphen. All right, don't make community policing a special different policing. It's policing, but it's got to be policing that has community engagement, beat knowledge and integrity, application of problem-solving tactics, co-producing policing with affected neighborhoods, but evidence-based tactical policing that catches robbers, burglars, and car thieves. But you're doing it all at the same time. When I grew up in policing, it's like we did the sweep. We jumped into the neighborhood. We wrote everybody up. We stopped 1,000 cars and then said, well, wait a minute, why are you mad at us? We're catching bad guys, but we were driving everybody crazy. The idea now is if you embed those tactics and the community understanding what you're doing, accepting it, and working with you.
We're going to continue this.
Don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Coming up on 4-1 Forward, Help Wanted. What does it take to wear the badge?
We'll ask Chief Flynn about what it means as his department prepares for a busy summer.